Hi everyone, how's it going? My name is Anna. Welcome. Some of you might be watching live with me, or some of you will be watching this later on. But yeah, we're going to be painting these cute little birds. They're bundled up because it's still winter for a lot of people, and I am a little sick of winter already, but that's okay. Painting makes it better, I think. If I didn't paint, honestly, I don't know if I could make it through it. Painting and my dogs actually get me through it. But yeah, I'm just going to wait a couple minutes to get everybody get settled. I am going to be painting with watercolors. If you want to use anything else, you're welcome to use inks. You can use watered down paints if you want to. Just make sure it's super water because there is going to be some wet on wet on the background. But the little birds themselves will have a little bit of detail going on, right? So I'll talk a little bit about the color palette. You are welcome to change the color palette as much as you want to. And I will show you a little bit of the colors that I have selected. They obviously don't have to be exactly the same. Hi, Carrie. Welcome in. Thanks for joining us. I love Australia. I haven't been there, but I just love Australia in itself. So welcome. But these are the colors that I have. So there is going to be some blues, some browns for the birds, a little bit of orange. And then for the background, you're welcome to kind of play around with colors that you enjoy if you don't want to do some blues. I did add a little bit of purplish colors and yellow just to give it a little bit more of a warmer tones, right? So it's a little bit of a contrast going on. Now for the white parts, I am going to be using like a white watercolor, but I recommend using a white acrylic if you have it. It will show up better than the watercolor. So if you don't have a good watercolor, it does tend to kind of get lost in there, right? So it just depends. Now this painting did come with a little outline if you wanted to use it, but I am going to show you how to sketch it really nice and simple. It doesn't take a lot of detail to it. All the details we're going to be adding as we paint. So don't stress out too much about that. But if you wanted to use the outline, you're welcome to do that. I believe you can rewind this video. Just you can't, what do you call it? Fast forward or anything like that. And I think you're also able to pause it. So that's something that you can do if you choose to. All right. But yeah, feel free to let me know where you're watching from. And if you've used watercolors before, maybe if it's your first time, I'll try to make it as beginner friendly as possible. There isn't a lot going on. There's a lot more just like detail and stuff going on in the middle here. But yeah, we're going to get started. All right. So yeah, you're going to need a pencil for the sketch of the little birds. If you are transferring your picture, then you can just watch along. Or pause it and get a drink or something if you are not going to sketch with us. But yeah. Oh, cool. Welcome, Nancy. That's awesome. I love knowing when everybody's watching from because sometimes it's like, Australia, which is across the other side of the world, which is so cool. But yeah, okay. So let's get started. So for the birds, now my paper size, by the way, if anybody has any questions before I start, just let me know. I keep a good eye on the chat, but the size paper I made for my original is really small, but I'm using a bigger paper. This is 9 by 12, and it's just bigger so that everybody can see it a little bit better, but you're welcome to do whatever size you want. And I recommend watercolor paper just because there is going to be a lot of water usage on the background, right? So the thicker your paper, the better. But yeah. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, nice. Hi, Clarissa. That's awesome. Welcome in, guys. So for the birds, I always recommend that you guys try to choose the middle. They're very much in the middle of your page. Now, they don't have to be exactly in the middle. It can be a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. There's no big deal if it's a little bit to the right or left. But I like to do a little dot just so I know where I'm going to start. Okay. This is just a good reference point. And this little dot is probably going to be my middle little bird here. And I'm going to be zooming in at this point because I don't think I need to show the whole background. There we go. So it's just like that. Oh, Maryland and New Bern. That's awesome. Welcome, guys. Nice to see you. I don't know what the weather is like for everybody else, but if you are going through winter, let me know if you're sick of it, just like I am. I just want some sun. Okay, so this little dot's going to be my middle bird. So I'm actually going to be starting with him. So I'm just going to be doing a little bump here. And this is where my little bird is going to be peeking his head. But the circle is really useful for this, by the way. Oh, there you go, Oakville. So you know what it's, you know exactly how we're feeling. Yes, I figured it was summertime in Australia, so that's really awesome. See, that's one of the reasons I love it so much because it's always warm, I feel, or most of the time, isn't it? Yes, you're right. It's the snow. I honestly don't mind winter too much. I'm not a huge fan of snow, although my dog loves it, so I'm okay with it because of him. But other than that, not a big fan. So the little mountain here that we have going on, it's the middle head of the bird, right? But then we're just going to proportion it a little bit. So we're just going to do all the other birds' heads. So we're going to do a little circle here. Now, by the way, guys, make sure you're sketching super light because you don't want to make your sketch super dark and like muddy when you start painting. So all I'm going to be doing here right now is adding all these little circles because I want to make sure I know where I'm putting all my birds. I have a little circle here. I think I did this too big, so I'm actually going to be adjusting it a little bit. So let's move it a little bit, make it a little bit bigger here. And then I'm going to make this one. Now, the sizes of your birds can differ, okay? You don't have to make them all exactly the same size as me. There we go. So just very little cute little circles. No, winter can be cold. Okay. So Australia does have a little bit of winter. I didn't know that. What's the coldest Australia gets, though? That's the real question. Because it gets about negative. Some winters, this winter has been pretty good, but some winters are really rough. Like you get like really bad, what do you call it? We got like a negative. One winter was like negative 40, negative 50. All right, so I have 3 little circles. Again, they can differ. And I'm just going to make this one a little bit smaller, actually. So about this much smaller. Like that. Okay. Now, if you're just watching along, which is fine, you know, you can see how we're going to be making these little birds. And then you can obviously watch this at your own convenience if you feel like, you know, you want to watch it after it's not live anymore. But I find lots of people like to do that. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 little birds, just the heads. So I'm going to start with the middle one. Now the middle one is a nice little round shape. Like I said, make sure it's light. I'm sketching darker than I normally would, just so that you guys can see a little bit better. So we're going to make this little plum guy. We're going to make him nice and plum. Have you guys noticed that the little birds, they tend to look so pudgy in the winter, right? They get like nice and pudgy. So you want to think of that roundness to them. We're just going to sketch the cute little roundness to it. You don't have to worry about the bottom. We're just going to close it in. Now this one, I think his head is a little bit too much. There we go. This one, his little belly is going to start up here. So we're just going to make his belly come out more. You don't have to make them this pudgy, but I love pudgy birds. I think they're so cute. Now keep in mind that because we're sketching them into sections, you can erase, oh, maybe not this one. You do want to erase the bottom part here because we don't need those. And now they're starting to look more like little snowman. Little snowman sections. Exactly, yeah. And the puffier they are, honestly, the cuter they are. So I'm happy you agree. Now this one's a little bit longer. So notice how the circle I made, it was a little bit more of an oval shape. So it's a little bit longer. But this one is going to start over here. So his belly, obviously he's a little bit taller. So we are going to have his belly go up a bit and then go down like this. So the key here is that you're drawing a taller bird, a middle size, and these two are about the same size, maybe a little bit different. So this picture's here just for your reference. If you feel like you're like looking at a reference better and just drawing from that, that's okay too. Sometimes some people like to do that as well. Now for here on the side, actually you don't have to do that because we're going to paint those little details, because you see those little feathers? The whole point is that you want to make it look like they're super bundled up. So some of the feathers here are kind of coming out into his body. So we're going to do that with the paint, not with our pencil. With our pencil, we're just getting the basic shapes. And then you want to erase this little part right here. There we go. All right, so the only things that we're going to be adding actually is going to be the little beaks, the little beaks. So let's start with this one first. The beak of this one's actually going to be on an angle. It's going to be going up a little bit, like this. And we're just going to do a little like, you can color it in with your pencil because his nose is going to be black. So you can color it. And while we're here, let's just add the cute little eye. He has a little eye here. It just looks like this. Again, you don't have to do any detail to the eye. You can just color it black because we're going to be adding a little white dot to it. That's about it. All right. And now we're going to start with this one. The middle one is going to have his two little eyes. Now, they have a little bit of a weird shape. So I suggest starting with the beak. The beak is going to be higher than the middle of the shape. So it's going to be right about here. You're just going to do a cute little triangle. Like that. Okay. Because he's kind of looking up a little bit. And then he's going to have this section go down, because his head is going to be brown and the rest of the body is going to be mostly white. And then on the sides, you're going to do the little eyes. Keep the eyes small because you can always make them bigger. You want to start with small eyes, and then if you need to, you can make them a little bigger. Birds have tiny eyes. Does anybody have a bird feeder? That's been my dream, to have a bird feeder. Well, my dog is crazy and he just barks at anything that's in my backyard. So I just live vicariously through my friends or family that have bird feeders. I love them so much. I think they're so cute. And then do you see the little dot that we use here? You can use that for the beak of this one, but I'm actually going to lower it a little bit because his little head is about here this much. So we're going to do the same thing we did with that one, and we're going to do a little triangle like that. It doesn't have to be super big though. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, when I go to my partner's house and he has a cat, he definitely loves to watch the birds and the squirrels. They're just so much more quieter about it. Now, the only difference about this little part here is that you are going to do some sides to it. So we're going to do these little round shapes on the side. I'm going to zoom it in more so you guys can see better. Let me know if you can't see it or if you're having trouble with it. Just looks a little bit different. But this one has the same thing as this one, where it goes down like this. Just to separate the face with the body. And then the eyes are going to also be on the side like this and like this. There we go. Okay, and that's it for this three. Now the tall one is going to be a little bit very similar. He's just going to have his nose also a little bit high up. Not nose, sorry, his beak. It's going to be coming out. Make sure you don't draw the beak too big, unless you're drawing a different type of bird. Maybe you're doing your own type of bird. Maybe you're doing a cardinal or anything else like that. I'm just doing like, I don't even know what these little birds are called. But they're just like the little brown ones that I see all the time in my backyard. I should know their name, but they're super cute and simple. And then the eye is going to be right about here. So notice that their noses and their beaks and their eyes are very in the same plane. So they're not super far apart. They're very close to each other. So keep that in mind when you're drawing it. And now this one's going to have a little bit of a section also going down this way, like that. Okay. Something like this is good. And there we go. There we have the cute little, yeah, kind of like wrens. Maybe they are wrens. I wish I knew the name of it, but you want to create this little like a round shape between all of them, right? So you want them to be cute and huddled up like that. That's the whole point. Okay, so the rounder, the better. It almost has like a little bit of a shape, a heart shape. Now, for this one, the only difference between all of them is that this one, his little foot is going to be coming out of here. So you are going to be bringing it out and doing a little foot like that. Because and then the reason you're drawing that first before you do the branch is because you want to make sure that you have enough space. So my recommendation is from here is you go into the body like this. And we're going to do the branch going up. I'm going to zoom it out a little bit so you can see. There we go. So that way you have, also when you guys are sketching something or painting anything, look at the negative space. So you want to have this little triangle here. And then we're going to go up from here. We're going to go up this way. So it creates like a bendage branch. And then I recommend you make your branch really thick. So let's make our branch nice and thick here. Don't make it perfect. Try to make it nice and, what do you call it? Bendy or like wood-like. So it's do you notice how my lines are very intentionally imperfect? That's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're drawing really like wobbly almost. Okay. So obviously this one looks a little different than that one. That's okay. I like the way this one looks. My goal is to make this thicker and it gets smaller as it goes up. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're drawing yours. And then over here, we're going to do a little foot. Just 3 little lines like that. And then 3 little lines like this. You almost want to make it look like the belly's on top of the branch. And then this one could have his little foot also coming out a little bit, but not too much, just a little bit. It'll be a little bit less than that one. Something like that. Okay, so in total, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 little feet. Because you want to make it seem so like you can't tell which one's which. Because they're so huddled up. Yeah, oh no, I'm so sorry to hear that. A pet lorikeet. What does that one look like? I'm curious. But oh, I bet birds are awesome. They make really good pets. My neighbor actually has a cockatoo. I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's like a white bird. It's really big. They're beautiful. But yeah, I live vicariously through her as well because she has a big bird. But yeah, so the tail of this one will come out a little bit like this. It's gonna be kind of like a diamond shape a little bit. Again, don't make it too detailed. You just want to have a little bit of information out here. You don't want to make it super, super detailed because we're just trying to kind of cockatoo. Yes, that's what it was. Your nail paint. Oh, thank you. Yes. That's also another thing that makes me happy about winter. Just doing my nails. Because in the summer, I tend to not do them as much. But thank you so much. but yeah, so the tails come out like this. You don't have to draw everybody's tail. This one could be the back one or the front one. It doesn't really matter. It's just up to you kind of to make it look like things are in there. Okay. All right. So we're almost done with the sketch, I promise. Like I said, just keep it nice and simple. So another branch you can do can be coming out here. We're just going to do the branches. We're pretty much done with the sketch of the birds. I'm just doing a little branch out here. And then you can choose wherever you want to put your branches. Maybe you want to have one out here. Again, make it not perfect. You want them to just be in different sections of your paper. I'm going to have one come out here and maybe merge with this one a little bit. And then you could keep it nice and interesting, but just making them different looking. Looks pretty good. Oh, that sounds like such a pretty bird. I can't imagine. I'm so sorry. There we go. And then we're going to do another one here. And they don't have to be super dark like the branches if you want to make them lighter. I'm just making them nice and dark for you guys so you can see them properly. Okay. Yeah, of course. Any pet loss is horrible. So I would cry too. I can't even think about it, honestly. I'm just going to do one more here. There we go. I think that's good. So I think I'm happy with the amount of branches. You don't need that many. You could just have this amount. That's good. The main branch that you're going to have a lot of detail in is going to be over here. So that's what you want to do. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it for the sketch. Nothing too much. It's not a lot of detail. Like I said, it just takes a little bit of time to kind of bundle those little birds out, right? But like I said, it doesn't have to look perfect, especially if you try a couple times as well. So you are going to need some water, obviously some watercolors. I use a combination of bean paints. Sorry, it's so messy and atrocious, but I love making my watercolors kind of messy. It just makes it funner. But I will be showing you along what colors I'm going to be using if I change them. But this is mostly the color palette we got going on. So if you find colors similar to that, then awesome. If not, that's okay. You can play around with different tones of different things. But I will show you how I apply the watercolor paint on each little bird, because it is important to apply it a certain way. But watercolors are super fun and super forgiving, so don't be too hard on making it look absolutely perfect. My recommendation right from the start is to paint light to dark, okay? So you always want to start with a light wash, and then you can make it darker as you go, okay? So, yeah, absolutely, family members. You guys are totally speaking my language. I literally can't live without my pets, so it's very tough. I have only had dogs, but I've always wanted different animals around me. Oh no, I have dogs. I've had dogs and cats and turtles. That's about it. But I would love to have a bird at some point, for sure, because I love to paint them and just look at them. They're really awesome. All right, so I'm just thinking of what color to start with. So we're going to start with the brown colors on the birds, okay? The brown colors, you can kind of play around with the browns that you have. I will show you what brown I'm using. It's a little hard to see, but it looks like this. Oops, there we go. It looks like black, but I'm going to show you how it looks on the actual paper. So you can kind of play around with your browns a little bit and get the color that you want. This brown that I have is a little bit orangey. I'm just going to try it out here. See? It looks a little bit like that. So you can start with a really nice light wash of it. We're just going to go ahead and paint the top part over here. You can always go darker, but you can't necessarily go lighter unless you pick up the pigment with your brush, but it's just a little bit tougher to do. Okay, so I have my little head painted. And then I'm going to color the top a little bit the same. but maybe a little bit more. If you want to gray it, make it a little bit more grayish, you can add a little bit of black to it, and that should do it. There we go. They look like twins. I didn't mean to make them so like aligned, but that's okay. It is what it is. It doesn't look too bad. Okay, so we're just setting our colors right now, and then we're going to do all the shadows and all the little details. So keep that in mind. So at that point, now that you have it nice and like have a pigment down, you can wash your brush, and then you can move on to a royal blue color for the birds, the two birds. They don't have to be a royal blue, but I do recommend using a blue color, just like this one. See, it's like a really pretty royal blue. But if you have a different blue, you can definitely use a different blue. So this one's going to be one whole color. You can just kind of start with a nice layer, adding a little bit of pigment and a little bit of, and just spread it out a bit. It's very tempting to just like start with a really dark wash of it, but I do recommend you don't do that. Okay, so it's a nice, very light and very, oh, oops, this one's a little dark. That's okay. Make sure you go all the way to the edges so that you're getting the pencil lines. Notice that I always dip my brush back to some water, especially if I don't pick up enough water. You want to make sure you add that in there. Okay, so we got his little cute little body. So we have the blue and the brown. You can go now into the orange color. It could be a brownish orange. I'll show you what I mean. Something like this, which you can definitely start with this and then make it more orange. I like to start with an undertone and then darken it a little bit. But you can always just go with an orange at first. So there we go. So we have the belly all colored in. There. So it looks super flat, right? You want it to be nice flat colors. You don't want to add any crazy details right now because we're just starting out with it. But I am going to start my watercolor does dry pretty quickly, especially if you have good watercolor paper. But if you wet it too much, you have to wait, because otherwise if you put another color or another layer, it will bleed through the whole thing, right? So you have to be careful and just kind of sense how dry it is. I used to use a hairdryer to dry in between layers, but this one is such a small little sections. You shouldn't need to. Just make sure your brush is nice and not soaking wet every time you put it down. You want to just damp, because you can always add more water to it. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to use a darker brown. So whatever dark brown you have should be okay, but you don't want it to be super pigmented. You want it to just have a little bit of pigment here. And what I'm going to do is with my brush, I'm going to start making these little lines going upward. Very like tiny little strokes. I'm just going to zoom it in so you guys can see better. There we go. See, I'm doing these little strokes on it, just so that it looks like the little feathers. Okay. And you can always use a little bit of dark brown with some black, but very little. Sorry, my voice is cracking a little bit. I hope I'm not getting sick. And I'm going to do a little bit of a shadow on the corners here. But it's too harsh, so I'm going to damp my brush. And I'm just going to blend it out a bit. Can't escape the sickness here, though. Everybody gets sick. There we go. You see what I mean? So I made it a little bit darker on the corners, and I brought it out into the head. So it's not super, super intense. Okay. Now you can also use a little bit of a really light gray color to kind of go over those feathers a little bit, just to give it a little bit of dimension and a little bit of layering. We're going to be doing the same thing there on this little guy. But I want you to take the darkest brown, almost black if you have it, and I want you to kind of go over the head a little bit, just to show that contrast and shadows here. You see what I mean? Just like that. And then you can damp your brush again so that you don't have a lot of pigment. And you're going to bring your brush downward. You're going to do these little strokes going down all over his belly. You can do a little bigger ones or smaller ones. It's up to you. We did something similar to this with, I don't know if anybody was there, and you can say if you were, with the little owl painting that I did a couple of weeks ago. It was very similar, so you just have to be careful with the amount of strokes you do, because you don't want it to be overwhelming. They're just nice little details that you want to add to it. But if you did that little owl painting, you kind of know what I'm talking about here. Okay, so they're nice little strokes that you do downward, and then you can always take a little bit of that grayish color, which is just a black with a lot of water, and you can add a little bit of a shadow here. Very light shadow though. And you're going to bring that down to the feather of the little wing. Tail? The little tail. And then I'm just adding a little bit of pigment on the tail here on the sides. So I'm doing the same thing I did on the belly, but I'm just kind of spreading it out a little bit more. But I want to be able to hide those pencil lines. So I'm basically just kind of going over them a little bit. All right. That's already looking a little better, right? It's going to start looking a little bit more detailed and stuff like that. You don't have to go crazy with it. But now the bluebirds are a little bit different. I would suggest doing another layer of blue because I think it's too light. So I'm actually going to go back with my blue here, and I'm going to really pigment it now. You don't have to go this pigmented right away, but I'm just going to do another layer now. So I don't think he is blue enough. You don't want it dark enough that you're not going to be able to see any more layers, because I'm still going to go over it with some feathers. So you just want it enough so that you see a difference here. You could even start really pigmented at the ends and then just make it a little bit lighter by adding more water here. Don't oversaturate it though. Like, you don't want to use a lot of water for one section because it will start looking like a cauliflower. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. With watercolors, they can start to look like cauliflowers. It starts to spread out too much because you added too much water. So it's just something to keep in mind. I personally don't like the cauliflower look. I think it looks kind of cool, but it's not for everybody. So now that you like the color blue that you chose, right? So you have a good pigment. You're just going to go back to that pigment and use very little water, not too much. And you're going to do little lines going up like this. But they can go into the belly a little bit because you want it to look like he's bundled in there with him. Right? So the more you add feathers in here, the cuter he's going to look. And be really soft with your brush strokes, okay? Use a pointy brush if you have one. These are great to manipulate the look of things, specifically feathers and texture and stuff like that. So you want to be really nice and soft with it. If you want to practice on another piece of paper, you can do that. Just practice the movement, right? You have to have almost like a really well-balanced amount of water and pigment on your brush. So my recommendation is just testing it out on your different paper, just to see how well it kind of comes out. Because sometimes you can miscalculate it and then it's too much or too little, right? So we're just doing the little feathers here. The more you add, the more pigment is going to be. It's pretty cute. All right, I think I'm happy with it. I might add a little bit of really intense contrast right over here, like at the bottom, towards the bottom. So I just added a lot of blue and very little water. You can even add a little bit over here at the top. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here. I'm going to add a little bit more of another layer of blue on this little bird here, just to give him some more. Oh, do you mean right here? At the bottom here, you mean? Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Right here, yes. I'm going to add that as well. I didn't even notice. But you're right, I do have a little bit of blue. Because you do want it to make it look like, oh, whose feather is that? You want it to look confusing, I guess, in a way. So good eye. I will add that for sure. Make sure it's just a very tiny corner, so that's why. So yeah, if you're already using the blue here, you can definitely add a little bit of blue here on this side. So it could be any section of the tail. You're just going to add a little bit of blue coming out of the tail. And you're going to flick it out a little bit like that. But yeah, I think it was meant to be like either this little bird's tail or a little bit of this one out. But yeah, I definitely recommend testing out your brush like this and seeing how it comes out. Like what kind of texture it gives you. Because a brush can really make or break your painting, I find, sometimes. So it's good to just have a different idea of what it can do and how you can manipulate it. I think I like that. Now you can blend a little bit of black and blue if you want it to be really, really pigmented and really contrasty. Also some dark purple works really well. But I want you guys to add a little bit of dark blue on these little corners here, because these are important for the contrast of the painting. So you want to make sure that you add that those little dark corners in there. Okay. The middle one is like the warmest one. Everybody else is just trying to survive the cold. Now I don't like the belly of this blue one, so I'm gonna change it to a much more orange and brighter color. But I already have some yellow under here, right? So it will look really bright already. I'm just gonna go ahead and add some orange here to give it more life. But you can always blend it out a little bit. If you find like you add too much of one color, you can just add water and it will blend nicely with your painting. The nice thing about watercolors, you can either do a lot of detail or a lot of like movement. You can also add a little bit of orange at the bottom here. Just a little bit. Now you'll notice that this one has a much less harsh line than this one. So that's something to keep in mind, that you can adjust by just using your brush with some water, no pigment, and just kind of blend out these colors so that they're not as harsh of a line. You know what I mean? This will help a little bit. That's up to you. So if you want it to be harsh, you can leave it. Or if you want it to blend a little bit better, just go over it so that it's a little bit less harsh. And look how nice that looks. It was all blended just by adding a little bit of water to my brush. But not soaking. You just want it to be wet enough. And then the little lines here, instead of using orange, I actually use like a brownish color for those feathers. So it's very similar to this one. I added them here because brown, like a dark brown, looks better, I find, than actually using orange. But you can see what looks best for your painting because the colors might be a little bit different. So even if you have like a dark, like an orangey brown, that would work really well too for this one. You're just flicking your brush like this so that you create those nice little feathers. Okay. Nice and chunky, kind of. Just like that. And then you can always add more feathers as you kind of see how they look a little bit. They look so cute. Okay. Now, their feet are definitely just a black. You can just use a black or a dark brown. The darkest brown you have, I recommend that for the feet. And you're going to just use it like an eyeliner. So you're just going to use it with a lot of pigment, not a lot of water. And we're just going to paint his little feet. Nothing crazy about this one. We might have to go over the little feet after we finish the tree branch. But for now, we're just going to paint them here. Okay, so it looks something like that. Now, the noses are all different. So I recommend doing this one last because it's going to be black. So the rest of the noses are going to be like an orange color. So you can just use straight up orange. If you feel like your orange is not bright enough or too bright, mine looks like this. It's actually a pretty nice orange. It's kind of brownish, so it works really nice. I'm just going to paint the little noses now. And you don't want it to be soaking. You want it to be nice and, what's the word? Pigmented. Like that. I'm just going to paint it like that. Now this one, well, I will show you that at the end, but we are going to do a little bit of highlighting. If you have a white acrylic, awesome. If you don't, and you just have a really good, what do you call it? Watercolor, that also works really well. But for the noses, this nose, you're going to use black or like a really dark blue, almost black. Sometimes I don't even use black and I'll just use like super dark tones of something. But the nose is supposed to be kind of black. And while we're here, we might as well just do the eyes. So let me zoom in really quickly. I recommend using a very tiny brush for the eyes. Let me see if I can find mine. I have like a tiny, tiny brush that I use. There we go. For the eyes. But the key here is to not use a lot of water. So because you're using black here, okay? So you're going to use black. And you want to make sure that it looks like this. That you're able to almost use it like an eyeliner. And I show you guys this on other paintings I've done. You just want it to be very controlled. Okay? Because if you have it too wet, it will bleed out through the whole painting. So we're just going to paint the little eyes black. They're going to look kind of creepy. But don't worry, at the end, we're going to do a little highlight. And that will make all the difference on your painting. So we're just going to paint the little eyes black here, one here, and one here. Now, quick question for everybody is if anybody wants to share, have you painted birds before? Is this everybody's, like, your first time? Or have you given it a go to painting other little birds? And if you have, what kind of birds have you painted? That's the biggest question. I literally paint a lot of birds, a lot of things. If you've been to any of my other paintings, you know I've done a couple of different types. But yeah, they're just so fun. They're such a good start to your, this being a new hobby with watercolors or acrylics. They're excellent. I believe birds and flowers are like the best thing I find to start with if you're starting to paint. Or even if you just love doing it. But okay, so we have our little birds pretty much done, but now we're going to do the branches, and then we're going to do the watercolor background, and then we'll do the details. All right. Oh, nice. Yes, owls are amazing to paint. I love painting owls. They can be a little come out a little creepy because of their big eyes, but if you paint them with a lot of layering, I feel like they come out really nice. And cardinals, of course, yes, they're great. Oh, that's nice, Sue. That's your first time. That's awesome. All right. So now we're going to switch gears to the branches. So I recommend using a bigger brush for the branches, but you can still use your regular brush, the one that we were using, like a medium size. This is kind of a small size. So yeah, you can use a bigger one. I'm going to show you the big one I have. I use this one usually for like my big chunks, like the branch stuff, and then the background I usually do. So for this one, I'm going to wet my brush nice and wet. Again, just dab it a little bit so it's not super soaking. And I'm going to use, you want to use any brown you have. So, you know, it could be if it's going to be like more oaky, then you want to make it a little bit lighter. If you want it to be nice and dark, you can. I usually use a pretty dark brown, and I'll show you the color. It looks kind of like this. This is the brown that I personally like to play with, paint with. But you can use a more orangey brown too. That's okay too. Okay, so it doesn't really matter too much as long as you like it. Bird boots while carrying the head. Oh no. That's so funny. What kind of bird was it? Look like some bird. You know, that's happened to me before. Sometimes, I don't know, with birds, it is sometimes getting their body right. As much as the head, because then it can look a little bit uneven. But I'm sure it looks great. It's funny though. So, sorry, the thing I'm going to do first is just going to go and do a light wash of my tree branch. So you can just go ahead and paint your whole branch nice and brown. You don't need a lot of water for it. You just want to spread it out, okay? It's okay if you go over the pencil line a little bit. I'm going to be outlining it with a darker tone. And if you go over the feet and it kind of washes a little bit, that's okay. You can always go back to it. A mystery bird. That's so funny. I love that. Oops, I actually went a little bit high. Okay, that's okay. So yeah, it might, I'm not worrying about the feet too much because you can always go back to it and make them darker. So don't over stress about that too much. There we go. And by the way, we're not going to do the details on the branch yet because we want to have all the colors of the background put in there so that it doesn't blend all your colors together. Okay, so we're just putting a little bit of brown here just to remind ourselves where everything's going to go. But I'm going to use the brown again to do the second branch here. So I am going to be adding a lot of different textures to the tree branch. But like I said, we're going to do that towards the end just because we want to have kind of map out all the colors here. So we don't have to worry about it afterwards because when we're putting down our colors on the background, we are doing kind of wet on wet. So you just don't want it to be too detailed and then it just kind of washes off. You know what I mean? That's the problem with watercolor. Sometimes it activates again if you use too much water. So right now what you guys can do is just fill in those branches with the brown color that you want to use. Keep it light. My recommendation is keeping it light because you don't want it to be too dark, or you can darken it off more after because you will be darkening it more after, like certain sections here and there. Oh my goodness, my voice is just completely fading away. You know when you can feel it, like you can feel your throat just starting to get a little thicky. There we go. Hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, So there's our tree branches. Nothing crazy, just putting a little bit of color. Let them dry for a couple seconds. And then we're going to do the background. And then we'll do the details. Okay. In the meantime, you can just give it a second to dry. Just going to take a sip of water. Does anybody use a, what do you call it? A hair dryer to dry in between sections? I haven't done that in a long time, but just because I tend to do a lot of detail on my paintings, so I stopped needing to do it, but it does come in handy. All right. So it doesn't have to be 100%, as long as it's dry enough for you and you feel like it's okay. Like you shouldn't have added too much water anyway to the branches, but if you did, you can give it a couple seconds. This next part is really fun and kind of loosey-goosey. You're just basically adding water and then pigment, okay? So a lot of what I did here is I added a lot of pigment on certain sections. So the key is to add, you don't have any pigment on your brush. You just have your brush and it's really wet. And you're just going to add, I'm going to start down here. I'm just going to add some, oops, make sure your brush is clean. There we go. Well, it's okay if it's not super clean, but clean enough. So we're just adding some water to this whole section. Try to avoid the branches a little bit, but they can be touching for the most part. I'm just adding some water. And I get pretty close to the branches, but not completely touching it 100%. Just close enough. Okay. So I made sure that I put nice little sections of water, and then you want to choose your colors. So whatever colors you feel like using, I'm going to be using some royal blue here. I'm just putting down the pigment. I didn't really add any more water because I don't need to. And you could just start spreading it out a little bit. If you feel like it's too much pigment, you can add a little bit more water. I suggest cleaning your brush a little bit, but taking off some of that water excess and then just blending out the color. But it really is up to you on how pigmented you want it to be. And don't panic about the way that it looks, because it can always get better. And then I'm going to add a little bit of purple actually over here. And then clean my brush. Make sure you're cleaning your brush and brushing it off so that you don't have that much water and pigment going on. The whole point is that you want the branches to have all this pigment and kind of blend out with each other. Like this. This looks nice. See what I mean? So you're just kind of adding and seeing how it goes. Maybe you want to add a little bit of different colors. Maybe you can add a little bit of blue here. I have this pretty like light blue that I really like. You can definitely add a little bit of that. Just have fun with it. You don't have to make it look perfect. Like I said, it's supposed to look kind of mystical. But I do suggest adding water before you add pigment. So now we're going to add a little bit more water here on this area. Kind of go all the way up. Just be careful with when you're adding the water. Just make sure it's not completely soaked. So because you might make the birds bleed as well. Like bleed out into the paper. You just have to be careful. Yeah, they're not too bad. They're nice and easy, right? I love them. And then I'm going to add a little bit of blue here. Look how pretty that looks. Just kind of spreads out. I love watercolors. But if you don't damp the water first, that won't happen, right? I'm going to add a little bit of purple here. This might turn out a little bit darker than my original one, and that's okay. Kind of like that. Colors. There we go. Looks pretty nice. Maybe a little bit of purple here. If you feel like you're adding too much pigment, just clean your brush and clean it off from the water a little bit, because your paper should already be wet when you're putting down this pigment. So keep that in mind. If you get it on the tree branches, that's okay, because your tree branches are going to be we're going to go over them anyway, so it's okay. Now your paper will fold a little bit, especially if you're adding water. So don't worry, you can always bend it back. But also putting washi tape helps a lot with that. So I'm adding more water here on this section here. And then I'm going to add some blue. Nice little blue. The washi tape also keeps it nice and clean. Like clean lines, you know? So it can be nice and fun. Yeah, this is the fun part, I think. Letting watercolors do their thing. Again, notice I'm kind of painting over the branches. Don't stress about that. You are going to be able to paint over them anyway. There we go. So the reason I chose purple and blues is because I'm thinking of winter, right? So I'm thinking of those nice tones. You can do different colors, of course, if you want to. But purples and blues are nice. You can, then at this point, you can add a little bit of yellow in certain sections if you want to. This will just give it a nice little contrast. Does it fully go? Maybe not so much, but it still looks pretty. You can also add a little bit of pink. So I'll show you what color I use for that. It's like a purplish pink that you guys can use. It looks like this. It's like a reddish pink, but be careful with the different colors you use. So it also has a little bit of a purple undertone. So I'm just using a little bit of that, and I'm putting down the pigment, and then with some water, I'm just blending it out a bit. Just like that. Be patient with it, just in terms of blending out. I feel like people sometimes get frustrated with watercolors because they can sometimes not do what you want them to do. Just try to manipulate the paint as little as possible and wipe your brush a lot and go back into it. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of be patient with the outlook of it. Sometimes the less you touch it in terms of picking up the paint and all that stuff, sometimes it comes out better. I'm adding some color to these little white spots here. Can you notice? Just to make it look a little bit nicer or more mystical. There we go. Just stuff like that. So you could add more if you want to. I think I'm okay with this. Like I said, you have to know when to like leave it alone in terms of the background, at least. Let it dry. You might want to go back into it after. It's just supposed to have a nice little watercolor background for the most part. All right. Make sure your paper is not super, super soaking wet, because we're going to go back now to do the branches, okay? You can pause this video, by the way, if you need to. And it will just continue, like keep going, and then it will play as it continues. All right, so I'm letting it dry for a couple seconds, and now for the brown part, because the brown that we chose, that I chose personally, is a little bit light, you can blend some of that brown with a little bit of black, and I'll show you what that looks like. Black is very strong, but with a little bit of brown, it can sometimes work nicely. So that's what it looks like with a little bit of black. So I kind of like that. That's kind of what I'm going for. I'm just going to make this a little brighter. Ah, too bright. Okay, that should be good. So yeah, like a little bit of a dark oaky brown. So I'm going to take that brown and a little bit of black. Again, test it out on a different paper like this. See how it looks. I like that. So I'm going to go back and do that over here at the bottom of my tree branch. I'm just going to spread it out like this without really stressing out too much on the placement. Because we're just trying to create like a wood look, like a wooden texture. So I'm not stressing out too much about making it look perfect. I added a little bit of black here because what you're trying to do is give it a nice contrast. Make sure you leave some, see how I push my brush like this? It's not soaking wet. That's why it looks nice and oaky. So it creates these beautiful like wood lines. That's kind of what you want to do. It takes a little bit of practice sometimes, I feel, and so feel free to test it out on paper. The faster you move your brush like this, the more it creates those in lines. Okay, so test it out on a piece of paper, see how it looks, but then just go for it. There we go. Maybe you can add a little bit more. So the key is not to have too much pigment, so that way it looks like this. All right, makes sense? Let me know if you want me to do that again and show you in the little paper. But this will really amplify your brush, your technique. So you're going to do that to all the branches. You're going to try to do that to all the branches. Just going to add that nice little dark section. Like that. And this will create a nice little contrast within your brush, within your branches, I mean. Like that. Once you get the hang of it, it really doesn't take very long to do. You just have to not be afraid of putting it down. Like that. Yeah. They look pretty good. So they have more dimension now because I added that nice little shadows in the branches, right? You guys see it? So that's kind of what you're going for here. Just making those little shadows in there. So you have to choose one side that the shadow is going to be. Make sure that you follow through with it though. So for example, if you do the shadow at the bottom, you're going to do the shadow on the bottom for all the tree branches. Make sense? Cool. All right. Now these ones, so all the little birds have to do is some of the little snow and all that stuff. So you do want to have, if you have a white acrylic, like I said before, use it. If not, you can use a white. I use Chinese white from Winsor and Newton. I can't say it properly, but it's a really good white. So I recommend this one. You can buy it on Amazon or any craft store, I think, which should carry it. Any craft store that has this brand, that brand. But yeah, this one's really good for like little details, I find, for the most part. It's just hard to see sometimes, so it's a lot of buildup in there. And so that's the only thing. So white acrylic definitely works a little bit better in that way. It does tend to dry quickly, so. All right. And sometimes I'll just use it straight from the tube because it's not that pigmented. Like I wish it was more pigmented. So you can use a small brush for this section right now. And we're basically just going to use some white for the eyes. Yeah, and a little white circle. Let's see. Can you guys see okay? Okay. So you're going to use some white. And if you're using watercolors, don't use a lot of water. You could almost just use the paint on its own. These little white circles will make a huge difference. So make sure you do them, okay? So So there's that. And then there would be a little highlight on this little nose right here. Right there. And then at this point, you can start adding the snow. So there's going to be a little bit of snow placement over here on top of his head. You can't see it that well unless you add a lot of white. So I recommend adding a lot of white. Just like that. This one might have a little bit on his head as well. It just depends where you want to put it. This one will have a little bit of snow as well in here. You can just have fun with the placement of it. Okay, now the more pigmented your brush, your white is, the better. You can even add a little bit of white hairs going down this way if you want to. See, it looks a little bit bluish, so it's not the greatest white. So I almost have to use it like fully pigmented, like this, in order for it to work. So it's just a little annoying, but that's okay. Now for this little part right here, so make sure your paper is not that soaking wet, but the branches will have a lot of white. So you want to add a little big chunk of white here. And you can kind of dab it going down a little bit so that it doesn't look as harsh. But you can also add a little bit of it in the branch, like that. Okay. And then at that point, you can just keep adding little chunks of white snow on the branches. The snow is definitely not like you can skip it if you want to. I added it so that it made more sense that they were bundled up, but they do that anyway in like different seasons. So it just depends. Okay. Now I'm going to add a little bit of white here on the top. Also, the white is very buildable, so you can definitely build it up as you go. So if you want to add more, you can afterwards once it's dry. Cute. They look so cute. Now, one thing I do recommend is going over the feet. So if you want to go over the feet with the black or some dark brown, make sure you do that because they are kind of fading here. That's because we made the tree branch similar color. I think it's pretty cute. There we go. So I did add some snowflakes. Now the snowflakes, I recommend adding them individually. So you know how sometimes you can do this, like you tap your brush with white. I don't recommend doing that for this, just because it's very hard to see them. So I recommend doing them individually. You can do a couple and then just do the little the other technique, but I recommend just putting them down individually, which is a little annoying, but you have more control. You can also put a couple on top of the birds. The ones that you'll see the most is on the white birds. Sorry, the blue birds. So keep that in mind that you might not see them as much on the brown birds, but that's okay. I'm just going to add a couple of little snowflakes here. This would make a really cute card for someone that loves birds. I always like to make a lot of my paintings into little cards, or sometimes just framing them and putting them up in my kitchen. Oh, they also will show really nicely on the tree branch, by the way. So keep that in mind. So you can definitely add quite a few. I like to add white somewhere in different spots here and there. Just depends. Okay, that looks pretty cute. Now I'll show you what it looks like without the washi tape, just so you can see what I mean. I think I'm not missing anything. You can add more contrast on the tree branches. I might do that It's just a little wet right now, so I don't want to do that right now. But you can definitely add a lot more contrast in your tree branches. Now, I do recommend using, if you did try this again or whatnot and you decide you want to do washi tape, do like a washi tape, not painter's tape. Well, you can do that. You just have to make sure that your paper is nice and dry, because if you take it off too quickly, it will rip your paper. This one won't do it because it's very soft. But look how nice that looks. It's so framed already for you. So that's why I love doing the work of it, like putting the tape, because it can be a little annoying putting it down. But then it's all worth it after a little bit. And guys, make sure you share your artwork if you feel comfortable. You can share it on the Facebook group, Artist Palette, or there's the watercolor one specifically for the free events. We love to see them. They always turn out so cute and pretty. Oh yeah, there we go. There's our little birds all done and finished. Look nice and cute. Like I said, you can add anything else you want to it. Maybe a little bit more contrast here. It's actually kind of bothering me. So I'm going to add a little bit of black and brown here as well. Honestly, the more you add, the more contrast it's going to be. So like the darker you make this area, the better. So I definitely recommend it. Just to give it that nice intensity, you know? But I love them. I think they're super cute. They always turn out adorable for me. Like in terms of how happy I am with the actual painting. I think they're a nice, fun painting to do. You can intensify the colors as much as you want to as well. So keep that in mind. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, this is a good time. It could be about watercolors or any of the techniques that I did in specifically. Or just any comments. So this is a free event, obviously, but if you, tips are always accepted. I love doing these free events. It gets nice to interact with everybody. But I do have another event, a video premiere of another set of birds. They're the lovebirds. If you haven't seen it, you can check out the website and check out the watercolor events and you will see it there. So it's very romantic. Actually, I have a picture of it. I'm going to show you guys so you can see what it looks like. These ones are for Valentine's Day, though. So it looks like this one. So this will be a video tutorial, not a free event. But it's so much fun to do. They're absolutely gorgeous. Budgies, I think they're called. So it's a little bit more detailed. But yeah. Feel free to join that one. My name is Anna again. If you're looking for me as an instructor, you can find me under Anna. So I don't see any questions coming, so I'm assuming everybody's okay. I hope you guys had a lovely time, and make sure that, yeah, you can pause this video as much as you need to. Take your time with it. Like I said, watercolors are very fun and you just have to be patient with them. But yeah, you're very welcome, Clarissa. And I hope to see you guys in my next event. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody. All right. Okay. Bye, everyone.